self-worth is what saved me from the beauty myth.
Mm.
And there's a thing about beauty, as I said to you earlier, when you start to unpack the beauty myth, you get into tons of social questions, you get into tons of self-appreciation questions, and you get into tons of questions about economy. It's a huge thing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another show with Amanda and Bess today. I'm really delighted to have you here. We've already had a little pre-conversation and we talked last week. And one of the things that you mentioned was around beauty. Now, I know that you've had multiple different careers, which I'm really excited if you're able to even share that because I was like, what? That's so cool.
It all makes sense.
And then I'd love to hear a little bit more about, as we're doing these self-worth stories, what one of these careers was as a model. So could you share perhaps the pre, the during, and the post self-worth days in that part of your career involving beauty in a way?
I'd be happy to. Although I'm intrigued by the pre-post and after self-worth, because I think that my self-worth is what saved me from the beauty myth.
Mm.
Uh, and there's a thing about beauty, as I said to you earlier, when you start to unpack the beauty myth, you get into tons of social questions, you get into tons of self-appreciation questions, and you get into tons of questions about economy. It's a huge thing. But let's back up. We'll go back to the beginning. I was the last of a lot of children, and I was quite a lot younger than my elders. So I was the pretty girl, and that was all. And
Mm.
meanwhile, I was a huge tomboy. I spent all my time out in the forest with my dog and running around and going fishing and hanging out with my brother who was a bit older. So did lots of guy stuff, and I loved being dirty, and which explains some of the careers I had afterwards. But the pretty girl. So the deal was, there's this tomboy, and my parents were shaping me into a society that at that time women were meant to get married. So being pretty was definitely a box that was ticked, like, oh, okay. But then they said, no, what are we going to do with her? Because I was completely wild. I was a savage child. And and then it was time to train me to be a lady. So there was this whole social aspect to beauty in my generation, at least. And also there was an aspect of beauty in general. And I came along shortly around the time that Cleopatra came out. So I was looking around, and all of these women had this like phenomenal eye makeup and these short dresses with Egyptian thing. And it was, to me, the whole thing was about presentation and costume and what's on the outside. And I was fascinated with the theater and with music. And let's fast forward. Adolescence hit, and then I had to be in a group of. Luckily, I went to an all-girls school, so there was no competition to get the boys' attention, which I didn't care about because I always had it. I would always find the fat kid who was interested in physics, and that would be my guy. And it was like just not a thing for me at all. And at the same time, I was still working in this total fascination with making things. I was a craftsman and theater. So I I remember dragging my parents off to see Death in Venice. I think I was 12 years old, and you couldn't go without your parents. I shouldn't have gone anyway, and I thought my father would love it because he was so into Thomas Mann. And he bailed out after 10 minutes. He said, okay, I'll accompany you in, but I can't watch this guy, sweating over a 15-year-old boy. But it was, for me, it was like, oh my God, there's so many kinds of beauty. There's so many cool things to tell and so many stories to tell. So needless to say, I went into costuming. I became a costume designer. And, you know, the whole thing about being a lady or going to school or finding the engineer husband and having the 2 children and all that stuff was social, and it was about belonging to something recognizable.
Mm.
And I really don't, to this day, understand it, you know, because there's a fascination for a certain time about modeling your face, and you'll see this on Instagram, you know,
Mm-hmm.
modeling your face, and then now the thing is eyebrows. And we went away
Yeah.
from modeling, now it's eyebrows. So you have to have like perfect eyebrows.
Mm.
All of this was totally foreign to me. I had no idea about any of it. And I looked at it like an anthropologist. You know, it's like, what gets people going? You know, what are they excited
Mm.
about? What's beautiful? And it just so happened there was this crossroads where I was in the canon of what was beautiful somehow,
Mm.
which I
Mm.
didn't actually believe. And I think I already knew that it's transitory, that, and again, I think self-worth, it was like, if it felt right, it was right, you know, and I could do it. Otherwise, I was wearing a costume, I was putting on a show, and I was not that confident because I was a head taller than everyone in my class. I was a geek. I had these stick legs, huge doorknob knees, you know, everything that you could hate about yourself, I hated, because that's what teenagers do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's about conformity. And it took me years to understand that conformity equaled a form of acceptance, and not so much self-acceptance but group acceptance, which is from outside, right?
Mm.
And that was probably when the seeds were planted. And I resisted being a model. Everybody said, oh, you should model, you're so tall, you're so slim, da, da, da. And then somebody else would come up to me and say, you're so skinny, I hate you.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard this
Mm.
constantly.
Mm.
You know, how dare you not be happy, you're so slim. I was like, well, I didn't ask to be slim. You know, this is my genetics. And
Mm.
so it was like this conflict I had about beauty that I didn't really understand, but I loved what was on the outside. You know, I loved the big square hair and the photos from Richard Avedon. And I just loved everything about ornament and decoration, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not what's inside.
Mm.
And I think for a long time I coasted on that wave of, you know, making beauty, but not necessarily being beauty, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or being or feeling beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I would get really like electrical jolts when we would do something in the theater that was phenomenal. And the same thing when I was modeling. But I had this funny personality, and I was lucky because I came into a promotion of models who were all goofy looking like me, you know, girls with big noses, and maybe, you know, it was a red hair period, so I had red hair, and you know, so lots of things kind of combined to me
Mm-hmm.
being useful. But from very early on, I would go to castings where you have to, they're called go-sees, and you have to go see the client. And for photography, it was like, no, just forget it. Your teeth are crooked, your nose is too big, just no, you're not beautiful.
Well.
And you know what? I just didn't mind. Because I also had this double whammy thing in my mind where beautiful equaled stupid. Because you hear that a lot, that, you know, models are dumb.
Mm.
Uh, and so, you know, I was in fashion design school at that point, and after years of costuming, I was old. I was way too old to be a model. And somebody grabbed me backstage at a show and said, you have to go on. The girl who was supposed to take the opening role didn't show up. My feet were the right size. And that's how I started modeling.
Wow.
So, and I was producing that show, right? But so they put me on stage, and I have very strong glasses, right? I have these very magnetic, magnifying glasses. And they put me on stage without my glasses in the dark. I'm like stumbling around, and somehow convinced somebody, and he was an agent from Paris, and he brought me to Paris. And 2 days later, and he said, I have some work for you. Let's see how it goes. And I started working at Chanel.
How old were you then?
I was 27,
Hmm.
which is way over the hill. Most
Mm.
models at that point were, done by then. And I agreed to go on the condition that he would introduce me to Serge Lutens, who was a photographer who was responsible for all of the campaigns for Shiseido.
Mm.
And I'd been looking at his work for years because it's all decoration, it's all costumes, it's all, these very ornate, amazing set designs. And I said, I'll go if I can meet this guy. And he sent me out to see Serge Lutens, and Serge and I got along like a house on fire. And I was the poster child for Shiseido for about 5 years, with a bunch of other girls who were like myself, a little different, a little strange. But what I had to witness was these go-sees, these castings in Paris for real runway shows. And I was in my element. I'm meeting these designers who are my icons, people who could do things with fabric, with embroidery, with feathers, and there was a love affair between fashion and costume. And I just sunk into it. It was like, if you can't beat them, join them, And I realized as a model, instead of being down the hall sorting buttons as an assistant designer, which is what my destiny was going to be, I was in the studio with Yves Saint Laurent, with Karl Lagerfeld, with Claude Montana, with Mr. Valentino, with Mr. Givenchy. And I became, because I was old, I became one of the girls who was identified with a certain group of clients who were old ladies. Yay! So
At 28.
yeah. It was like a perfect conjunction of all these things. But I did have to watch that. I would go, for instance, I remember one day going to a casting for Claude Montana, and there were 50 girls. And it was a time at the kind of confluence between punk and, sort of Baroque fashion. And I was neither. I was just this geeky tomboy. And for some reason, he took me. But every time I went to a casting for Claude, I reintroduced myself. I said, I'm Bess. And after a while, he said, are you going to stop it? I know who you are. But I was like, I wasn't seen, I was in this mass of women, all of them interesting, some of them very, very beautiful. But I had to somehow determine what my distinction was. And he said, you're you. I was like, oh, thank you.
Hmm.
And that was the outside.
Mhm.
The guys who loved my inside were Nino Cerruti, Mr. Saint Laurent. They would ask my opinion about what I was wearing. They would say, pocket, no pocket. We'd have conversations about historic dress, which for me was like all a giant win. The whole thing was a giant win. So judgments about my looks, or I'd hear somebody say she's too old and ugly. I had an agent, Eileen Ford, said that about me. She's too old and too ugly.
Well, how would you react? Like, so for you, like you said before, like beautiful in your mind, you had stupid. Like at that
Yeah.
point, were you still thinking that same way, or if someone were to tell you that, how would you react?
It was funny because I think I was still a bit rebellious about it. And when she said that, I was like, yes, good. I'm too good to be one of those dumb girls.
Mm. Mm.
But who knows what, because as I matured, all of this stuff started to fall into place like Tetris, and I started to make sense of it. I was very much an opportunist. I
Mm.
just jumped on board because I could work
Mm.
with these amazing designers, Matsuda, people. Yoji, Azadine Alaya, these guys who had so much to say. And I was totally, and I think that's what they liked about me, is that I liked what they were doing and I was so interested. And I would hold up the sleeves and I'd examine things. And the other girls would be like,
Mm.
not all
Mhm.
of them, but mostly concerned with themselves and what
Mm.
was on the outside. And as soon as I got my makeup done, I'd be like digging through the racks and looking at stuff. So I think that's what they liked about me. And yeah, I went through 2 pregnancies and I was still modeling and it got to a point where I just said, okay, this has to stop. I've got other things to do. So I bought a farm. and I
Next
ruined my
cycle.
I ruined my fingernails. But even when I was working I remember one year I was at Givenchy, and in the mornings I was working at Mr. Givenchy, and I was very popular at the time because I was pregnant. So I was radiant, and I had big boobs, and everything was just nice. And but it's transitory because you get fat. But meanwhile, I was I was painting at a studio for Jean-Paul Goude. We were doing some scenery for a big dance performance. And I would go out there, and I was in charge of the team, the painting team. And I'd get covered with paint. And I'd come home and like, scrubbing like crazy, trying to get the paint out of my nails, and go back to Givenchy in the morning and just be a thing. And inside, I was laughing. It was like, this is such a double life. It's so funny. Somebody needs to make a movie about this. I was like totally scrubby, dirty person all afternoon. So for me, I was playing both sides of it. And for me, it kept it in balance,
Mm.
which is what was the through line from the time I was a little girl, was beauty exists in all sorts of different places. And what I realized, and I really felt this, especially when I was pregnant, in that pregnant year, um, as long as I felt radiant, I was radiant.
Mm.
And onward through, several other careers after that. But it didn't matter, if I had the third assistant makeup artist or the 15th apprentice hairdresser. If I believed in them, they believed in me, and it worked. And there were a few occasional disasters, but um, it really came down to, what is this about? What's the point? What's the purpose of this? And the purpose, I think, of anything beautiful is to help you dream. To help you dream and to help you feel a form of bigger than you-ness.
Mhm.
And of course, in the theater, I was very lucky as well to work with really phenomenal artists. And it was the combination of everything that made it work. So no one person was more important than any other person. That wasn't the case in the fashion business. There was a hierarchy, and the hierarchy changed every year. Who was the it girl, or who was what was the trending look, or so even that, it was like stepping into a river that's never the same when you step into it again. And I think that self-worth in that context is getting back to the point. What is the thing that makes me feel like it's worth it, that it's beautiful, that it's useful? And some very ugly things got done that were touted as extraordinarily beautiful in the context that they happened in. Uh, and I think, when we talk about the beauty business and women looking for the product that will make their wrinkles go away, or, just the whole generation of, why do women have to pay more to have their hair cut than men do?
Mm.
It's because we're suckers, and it's like this social, we go back to this social thing of, you will belong if you have this haircut. You will be loved if you have this haircut. You will be admired. You will have a place. And nobody from outside of you can give you that place. I guess your parents can because they give birth to you, but um, you have to make that place. And I think I was super lucky to start my life in the theater, where everybody was geeky, everybody was weird. And women who were particularly beautiful got pigeonholed into, and it's what's happening now with the cinema. You know, there may be a dozen actresses who get work consistently because they are flawless.
Mm.
But it's the flaws that you fall in love with.
Mm.
You know, when Meryl Streep plays comedy, you love her twice as much. And she's one of the most beautiful actresses in the world. But it's when she falls down the stairs that you love her the most.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I thank you for sharing. It's something that even though I'm from a different generation, I watch my mom, who I mentioned, I believe when we met, she also used to be in the day like a model.
Hmm.
And I remember like she would mention that she would feel the or like sense the jealousy
Hmm.
of others. But it's wonderful to hear that you owned it, like you didn't care, like it
Well, of course,
it.
there were insults, Amanda. There were things that people would say. I remember one time Karl Lagerfeld imitating me walking, uh, and it really hurt, you
Yeah.
know, because I walk like a duck, you know, and he could have told me it in a different way.
Mm.
Uh, you know, and of course I corrected my walk because of that, but it was not the right way to do it. But again, I felt like what a not nice person, you
Mm.
know, that's not nice. And I don't know, nice isn't the objective, but what's the point? You know, if the point is to make me feel gracious, it's not treating me like dirt that's going to make me feel more
Mm.
gracious.
Mm.
And yeah, there were incidents, you know, because I was clumsy and I was, you know, when I came to Paris, I owned one piece of makeup, which was a black eyebrow pencil, which I didn't know how to use. So the girls were helpful, you know, and there are promotions. And again, it's important to remember that it's gone from bad to worse, you
Mm.
know, since they invented Photoshop.
Mm.
And I was one of the first people that got to play with Photoshop, not as fixing me, but as reproducing me with Frank Horvat. We were doing these things, these montages with Photoshop. But it was really shocking to me and scandalous when they had to pass a law about body weight, body
Mm.
mass, fat in your body. And I've been, you know, off and on watching these videos about girls who literally starve themselves to death. And and I would think about people saying to me, "You're so slim, I hate you." And these girls who starve themselves hate themselves.
Mhm.
And you can't be what you're not. And if being extra, extra slim comes with having a cardiac arrest, it's really not worth it.
Mhm.
But the pressure wasn't as strong when I was working. And the pressure was much stronger to get girls to stop drinking so much champagne and to get off drugs. The photo girls were particularly susceptible to drugs,
Mhm.
sometimes diet pills.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
so there's like body shaming is one thing that we hear a lot about. Like now it's very okay to be your normal weight. Not only okay, but in fact, some very, very heavier girls are
Yeah.
starting to make careers for themselves.
Mhm.
But there's beauty shaming as well. And that's probably what your mom felt. You know, there's a
Mm.
sort of shame that goes with feeling like you're privileged when
Mm.
you didn't do anything to have that look.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can make it better, but you can't necessarily say that you're responsible for your cheekbones.
Mhm.
They just happen, you know?
Yeah. 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 And so because someone may happen, they put on less makeup or they dress
Yep,
themselves less because they're too shy to show up as
yep,
their true beauty and that they already are naturally.
yep.
Yeah,
Or they become a tomboy.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if it was cause and effect in my case. I know that what was available to me, what was interesting to me, was what the guys did.
Mm.
And the girls were playing Barbie, and I didn't care.
Mm.
Actually, I had trolls, and I would make costumes for my trolls, and Barbie was in a box somewhere. I didn't pay attention to her at all.
So how did you do it during the farm days? Did you bring some of the fashion? Did you wear makeup? No, you just.
And it was super interesting, Amanda, because I'm also a accomplished stitcher because of making costumes for so long. And I would make my own things sometimes. And I had this one dress that was all kind of um, pleated in a technique called primitive pleating. And I wore it to an event with all the chatelaine, because there were lots of very, society ladies around where I was living in the countryside. And I was greeted, and oh, you're wearing isemayaki. That's so beautiful. And she went off into this thing about how I always had the most wonderful clothes because I was a model. It was like this whole story she wrote about me that wasn't true. It's like, fine, I probably could have had a great clientele stitching clothes for people, except that she put a hole in it by saying it wasn't my stuff.
Mm, mm,
Yeah, but I didn't feel any need for that. My best friends were like the plumber and the guy who did the welding on our roof and stuff like that, farming,
mm,
and I really loved getting down and dirty. I felt back to where I was when I was a little kid, walking in the forest with my dog,
mm,
and back to center. It was probably the least glamorous point in my life. I'll tell you one very funny story and then we can sign off. I went back to Paris about 2 years after I got the farm, and I was invited to um, a party for Christian Lacroix. It was during the fashion week, and I had some work to do there for painting. And I was invited to this party, and all I had was like my rubber boots, and I didn't have any proper clothes because I wasn't there for a party. And I just showed up as best as I could, pinched my cheeks. And a young boy, and I recognized him as he came across the room, he came up to me and he said, "Weren't you Bess?"
mm,
And I thought, yeah, I was. And I still am.
mm,
This is the me I am now.
mm,
And the fact that that transitory moment of whatever glory I had or fame or, I was known by a lot of people, that boy had been my dresser when I worked at Valentino. And I recognized him. I knew him. I knew his name. And he didn't know really if I was me.
mm,
And I found that so interesting. And again, it was like I spent the whole evening scratching my head and thinking, what does this mean? Have I shifted off my base of who I am? And do I still, feel the feelings that I felt? And I felt as much excitement about the clothes as I felt when I started making costumes when I was 16.
mm,
But I didn't care at all if I was Bess or if I am Bess. I know I'm Bess.
mm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I know you said you want to wrap up, but I'm curious to go, where are you now? Like, who's this Bess that is experienced so many amazing stories throughout your life and all different changes of careers? Like, how, looking back and who you are now, like, how you integrated beauty and everything that you've learned into how you're spending your days.
Yeah, that's a great question, Amanda. Thank you. Um, I think the research for what's beautiful is still as active as ever. Where I am now in terms of career and work is I'm a consultant, and I work mostly in team dynamics and helping teams to communicate better, to have better relationships amongst themselves, and to really fix goals that they can feel excited about. Um, and that happened through a series of things. When I started consulting, I was in heavy industry, doing the guy thing. I was hanging out, in cement factories and airplane factories. And why? Because I felt that I knew a lot of things. I wasn't able somehow when I started that to integrate the real artistic applications, making costumes, making sculptures, painting, all that. I couldn't find a job actually in Belgium where they wouldn't hire me because I didn't have the references or I didn't go to the school that they recognized, or and so I really had a hard time. So I went back to get an MBA. I said, okay, I'm going to find out what I know and put it in a shape that I can do something with. So I did that, and I started consulting right away. And guess who hired me first? The circus. Before I got my diploma, the circus came calling, and they said, "We want you to do this. We want you to work with us to do some production." And I thought, well, I'm back to square one. This is what I was trying not to do. But it was super exciting, and I learned a lot. I worked with phenomenal artists, and it was like a reminder, like somebody tapping me on the shoulder and saying, don't forget who you are. And I took all of that into consulting. So I have a very particular approach where I'm talking to the individuals, I'm talking to the people, not to their problem. I'm talking to those people. And that developed more and more into more training focused and facilitation, which is where I probably belong, because it's half animator, half personality and half heart, more than half heart. But really reaching out and say, okay, what has everybody in this team got? What can they bring? Everybody's got beauty inside them.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got something in there that got them where they are now. And if they're not good with it, they need to know how to find where they are good. So that's what I'm working on now. And the beauty is in the margins. It's between, it's between your eyes and my face, or it's between the beautiful thing that you're wearing and your skin. The beauty lies there, and it's really how it's perceived. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And somebody can have a very, very unfortunately malconstructed child, and they think it's the most beautiful child in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the most beautiful child in the world. Mm-hmm. So let the love happen, and it goes together. Love and beauty, it just goes together. So where I feel well, where I feel integrated, where the people around me feel that way, it's beautiful.
Mm. Thank you. That's beautiful. Is there anything else you would like to share as a sign off to those who are listening?
Yeah, just definitely, we started on beauty and the beauty myth, and I want to say beauty is not a myth, but the myth that you can be better by buying something or by affiliating with something that is sold to you as rare. Beauty is not rare. Beauty is in everything you think, everything you do, when you feel like you're inside yourself, when you're seated in your own self-worth. And that's my sign off. Trust yourself.
Thank you very much, Bess, and I look forward as well to connecting with you further during the Self-Worth Awareness Week. Yes, starting February 8th.
Can't wait.
Book your tickets.
Yeah.
Come and join us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. A beautiful day.
Thank you, Amanda.
Bye.